The red earth of Ialeo carried stories in its dust. When the harmattan wind blew across the land, it did not move alone. It lifted memories, footsteps of ancestors, tears of mothers, laughter of children long grown. The narrow roads curved like old scars between clay houses, their walls warm under the sun and cool at night. Tall palm trees stood like silent guards, watching over the village as they had done for generations. In Ialeo, nothing was ever truly forgotten. The land remembered who planted and who refused to sow. It remembered who shared their harvest and who hid their yams in secret barns. The elders often said, "The soil listens." Even when men pretend not to hear, the earth hears everything. At the center of the village stood an ancient iroko tree. Its trunk was wide, its bark rough like the skin of time itself. Beneath it, the elders gathered each morning. They did not rush their words. In Ialeo, speech was not thrown like stones, it was placed carefully like seeds. Old Baba Ade would clear his throat and say, "A man who runs ahead of wisdom will trip over his own shadow." The younger men would bow their heads. Women passing by would slow their steps to listen. Even children chasing goats would pause for a moment. In Ialeo, proverbs were more than sayings. They were laws that shaped the heart. When a man wanted to marry, he sought counsel beneath the iroko. When a woman felt wronged, she brought her complaint to the elders. When disputes rose like fire, wisdom poured like water to calm them. As the sun dipped low each evening, another rhythm took over the village. Drums began to speak. Their deep voices rolled across the red earth, calling people home. Smoke rose from cooking fires, carrying the scent of pepper and roasted plantain. Mothers called their children inside, but not before the storytellers took their place. Under the silver moon, elders told tales of clever tortoises, foolish kings, and rivers that swallowed greedy men. Children sat wide-eyed, their chins resting on their palms. "Remember," the storyteller would say, pointing his staff toward the sky, "every action plants a seed, and every seed must grow." The children nodded, even if they did not fully understand. In Ialeo, stories were not just for passing time. They were maps for living. One belief stood above all others in the village. It was spoken often, like a prayer, "A child does not grow alone." When a baby cried at night, neighbors came with warm water. When a roof leaked during the rainy season, young men climbed together to fix it. When one family harvested cassava, others helped peel and dry it. Success did not belong to one person. It belonged to the village. Many years ago, when hunger visited Ialeo like an unwanted guest, it knocked on every door. Crops failed. The river shrank. Children's stomachs swelled with emptiness. In those hard days, a young boy named Kofi walked barefoot on the same red earth. His shorts were torn. His school slate was cracked. But his eyes burned with quiet fire. Kofi was not born into wealth. His father farmed a small piece of land. His mother sold vegetables in the market. Some days, there was only thin porridge for dinner. Yet when Kofi spoke of school, his voice carried hope. "I will learn," he once told his mother. "I will become someone who helps this village." His mother smiled, though worry lined her face. "My son, knowledge is a road that is not easy to walk." The village saw his hunger, not for food, but for books. And Ialeo remembered its law. When it was time for Kofi to attend secondary school in a nearby town, the village gathered beneath the iroko tree. Baba Ade stood with his staff. "This boy," he said, "belongs to all of us." Coins were dropped into a wooden bowl. A bag of rice was given. A neighbor offered sandals. Another promised to pay exam fees when harvest came. Kofi did not walk alone. He walked carried by many hands. Years passed like drifting clouds. The red earth saw him leave for the great city of Lagos, a place of tall buildings and endless noise. There, the roads were not dusty but paved. Cars honked like angry goats. The air smelled of petrol instead of palm wine. In Lagos, Kofi worked hard. He studied at night and labored during the day. He learned to speak in offices where air was cold and people wore polished shoes. He watched men chase money like hunters chasing antelope. But even in the city, when he closed his eyes, he saw the red earth of Ialeo. The first time he earned enough to send money home, his hands trembled. He walked into a small shop and transferred the money. When his mother received it, she cried. "My son has sent rain," she said. In Ialeo, news traveled faster than wind. "Kofi has remembered us," people said proudly. Each month, money arrived like a steady blessing. Roofs were repaired. Medical bills were paid. New school uniforms appeared on children who once wore torn clothes. At the market, women spoke his name with pride. "Kofi is a golden son," they said. "He has not forgotten the soil that shaped him." When he returned during festivals, he was welcomed with songs. Young boys followed him, staring at his clean shirts and city shoes. Elders blessed him. Baba Ade once held his hand and said, "You are proof that when we water a seed together, it can grow into a mighty tree." Kofi bowed his head. "Everything I have," he replied, "belongs first to this village." And he meant it. In his small apartment in Lagos, he often sat by the window at night. He could see lights stretching far into the distance, but his heart remained tied to Ialeo. "If I rise alone," he whispered to himself, "then I have not truly risen." He believed success was not measured by how high one climbed, but by how many others one lifted along the way. So he gave freely. He gave because he remembered the wooden bowl filled with coins. He gave because he remembered walking barefoot. He gave because the law of Ialeo lived inside him. A child does not grow alone. And as the red earth waited patiently under the sun, the spirit that walked upon it watched quietly, knowing that every blessing, if not guarded by wisdom, could one day become a burden. In the village where the sun rose like a drumbeat over the red earth, there was a young man named Tund. While others bent their backs in the fields, cutting cassava and lifting baskets of yam, Tund could often be found beneath the wide arms of the old mango tree. He would lie on his back, one leg crossed over the other, chewing on a blade of grass as if life owed him comfort. Women passed with heavy loads on their heads. Boys ran with goats. Even the elders found small tasks to keep their hands busy. But Tund only smiled and waved. "Work is chasing you, Tund," an old farmer once teased. Tund laughed softly. "Uncle, the sun is too hot today. Let it cool its anger first." His smile was bright, his voice smooth like palm wine poured on a festival night. People liked him. He had a way of making laziness sound like wisdom. When asked why he did not join the harvest, he would answer, "A clever man saves his strength for the right moment." When reminded that empty barns bring empty stomachs, he would reply, "God provides in many ways." His words were sweet. His hands were empty. Yet inside Tund's heart, something darker was growing. Kofi, his cousin, had once been poor. The village remembered the days when Kofi's slippers were worn thin and his shirt carried more patches than cloth. But Kofi had worked. He rose before the first rooster crowed. He traded in the market, saved his coins, and traveled to the city. Years later, he returned with a small truck, bags of rice, and a house with a shining tin roof. The village praised him. "Hard work has a loud voice," the elders said. Tund would clap with the others, but his smile did not reach his eyes. "If he made it," Tund whispered to himself one evening, watching Kofi unload goods from the truck, "why not me?" He began to believe something dangerous, that Kofi's success was not just Kofi's. That blood alone gave him a share. That effort did not matter as much as family ties. "Are we not from the same womb of ancestors?" he muttered. "If his hands are full, mine should not be empty." Like seeds planted in secret soil, jealousy began to sprout. At home, Kofi's mother, Mama Abina, sat on a low wooden stool, her back straight despite her age. She had eyes that saw both past and future. One evening, as Kofi counted his earnings, she cleared her throat. "My son," she said gently, "remember that blood is blood. A river does not refuse its own stream." Kofi paused. "Mama, I help when I can." She nodded. "Good. Because when a man climbs a tree, he must not forget those who watched him from the ground. Family is not a cloth you remove when it becomes heavy." Her words were not unkind, but they carried weight. Tradition in the village was like the iroko tree, deep-rooted and not easily shaken. Under that very iroko tree, the elders gathered each market day. They spoke of harvests and marriages, of disputes and blessings. One afternoon, as Kofi passed by, he heard his name. Kofi is generous, one elder said loudly. His hands are open like the sky in rainy season. Another elder stroked his beard and added softly, yes. But even the sky knows when to close. Too much rain can drown the farm. The men nodded. They praised generosity, yet their eyes were wise. They knew that greed sometimes hides behind the mask of kinship. Not long after, Tund approached Kofi with a face that carried just the right amount of sorrow. "Brother," Tund began, lowering his voice, "I would not ask if the matter were not serious." Kofi looked at him with concern. "What troubles you?" "My small trading business has fallen," Tund sighed. "Just a little help, only for a short time. When I stand again, I will repay you." It was a modest request. A small sum. Easy for Kofi to give. "Take it," Kofi said without hesitation. "We are family." Tund's eyes lit up. "May your pocket never dry," he said, bowing slightly. At first, gratitude flowed from him like a song. He greeted Kofi loudly in public. He told others, "My cousin has a heart of gold." But as weeks passed, the tone changed. The next request came quicker. And this time, it was not wrapped in humility but in expectation. "You helped me before," Tund said one afternoon. "You know my struggles. Just a little more." The amounts grew. The reasons multiplied. "My child is sick," he cried one day, pressing a hand to his chest. "The healer demands payment." Another week. "The roof has fallen. If rain enters, my family will suffer." Each story carried urgency. Each plea came with dramatic sighs and heavy silences. And every time, the pressure sat on Kofi's shoulders like a sack of stones. People began to whisper. "Does Tund's house have no end to misfortune?" a woman asked. But Tund only sharpened his words. "Would you let your own blood drown?" he would say, looking straight into Kofi's eyes. And so the door that opened with a small request now stood wide. What began as help was turning into habit. Gratitude had shifted into demand. And like a pot left too long on fire, something inside Kofi was beginning to boil. The village watched. The elders listened. And the Irako tree stood silent, knowing that every story must one day return to its beginning, where truth waits patiently for justice to speak. Kofi sat in his small apartment in Lagos, the hum of the city buzzing outside the window, yet his mind was tangled with voices from home. One voice was the sharp clarity of numbers, of ledgers and budgets, whispering that every coin must be measured, saved, and invested wisely. The other was the soft echo of ancestral wisdom, carried in his mother's words and the village proverbs he grew up hearing. "Blood is blood," she had said. "A river that forgets its source will dry." And now, the tug of these two worlds pulled at his heart like opposing tides. Generosity, once a joy, began to feel like a weight pressing on his chest. Each transfer he made carried the warmth of blessing, but also the cool sting of obligation. Kofi felt the shift quietly at first, a seed of unease planted among the fertile soil of duty. He did not yet see it, but the line between kindness and exploitation was beginning to blur. It started with a call that made his chest tighten. "Brother," Tund's voice trembled over the phone, "my little one, he has a fever that will not break. The healer says I must pay, or he will not survive. Please, Kofi. I beg you." Kofi closed his eyes, feeling the familiar pull of protection. "Tell me how much," he said softly. Money moved quickly from his account, crossing the distance to a village he longed to see again. Days later, Tund called again, but this time the sorrow had taken a different shape. "The trading venture, it has failed before it even began," Tund said. "I had hoped to sell kola nuts in the next town, but rain ruined the harvest, and thieves took what little I had left." His voice carried despair, yet something deeper lurked beneath, an expectation that Kofi would once again make right what misfortune had taken. Kofi sighed, sending help. The ledger in his mind protested, but the river of obligation flowed stronger than caution. Then came the story of the stolen phone, blamed on careless hands and cruel fate. "A thief struck my house last night," Tund reported. "All my plans, gone. If only I had the means to recover, to restart, to pay back debts before they come for me." Every word pressed against Kofi's heart, stirring the same protective instinct that had guided him since childhood. And yet, as he transferred yet another sum, A cold thought prickled at the edge of his conscience. The generosity that once lifted spirits now weighed heavy, as if each gift was a chain subtly wrapping itself around him. In the quiet of his apartment, Kofi leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Two worlds tugged at his heart, the wisdom of numbers, urging restraint, and the unyielding pull of ancestral duty. He felt the first threads of tension tighten. What began as love and obligation was slowly twisting into expectation, the quiet birth of exploitation. And somewhere, beneath the red earth of Ialeo, the village drums kept beating, carrying a warning that generosity, like the river, must know its bounds, or risk running dry. Kofi moved quickly whenever the phone rang. Each plea from Tund was like a drumbeat echoing in his chest, and he felt compelled to answer it with speed. "Send it now, my brother," Tund would say, voice trembling with urgency, and Kofi did not pause to question the story or weigh the sums. Money flowed from his hands like rain on dry soil, nourishing hope and duty alike. He told himself that silence and swiftness were proof of love, proof that he honored the law of shared blood. Each transfer was a promise kept, a blessing sent from the city to the red earth of Ialeo. As the weeks passed, the village began to notice changes. Tund's small hut now gleamed with fresh paint, his sandals were polished, and laughter followed him like a shadow. He lounged under mango trees while others worked the fields, his charm making idleness seem like leisure. "See how the river has opened for him," some whispered, nodding at his new clothes and long afternoons of rest. Boys ran past him with baskets of cassava. He waved lazily, smiling at the sweat on their brows. Where Kofi's generosity once lifted spirits, now it seemed to carry a weight that only Tund learned to enjoy. Behind half-closed doors, whispers traveled through the village like wind through tall grass. "Does this feel right?" one woman asked. "He takes, and he takes, while the rest bend under the sun," murmured an elder, peering from the shadows. Yet no one spoke openly. Family ties were a river too strong to cross, and tradition cautioned silence over confrontation. The village felt imbalance, yet feared breaking the unspoken law of blood and respect. Even as eyes followed Tund's comfort, no hand reached to stop it. Near Kofi's family compound stood the great baobab tree, once wide enough to shade half the square and strong enough to shelter children from rain. Elders said it had stood since the first stories were told under its branches, a symbol of unity and protection for generations. But in the months of giving without pause, the baobab began to change. Leaves browned and curled before their time, and the trunk, once solid and upright, seemed to sag slightly, as if carrying a burden too heavy for its roots. The elders gathered beneath the sacred tree one evening, their voices low and serious. "A tree that drinks without being refilled will falter," the oldest said, tracing a hand along the rough bark. "Harmony breaks not just in men, but in the earth itself. The ancestors speak through all living things." Kofi listened quietly, a chill running down his spine. The baobab was more than wood. It was a mirror of the village, of generosity stretched too thin, of blessings given without balance. And so the tree stood, its leaves whispering secrets in the wind. Every branch seemed to cry for renewal, every root groaned with quiet complaint. It became a living symbol of Kofi's drained generosity, giving endlessly, yet never being replenished. The villagers watched, sensing the warning, but waiting for the lesson that the baobab had long been trying to teach, that even the strongest among us, like the sacred tree, can wither when care and respect are ignored. Kofi sat on the balcony of his Lagos apartment, the city lights shimmering like stars fallen to earth. His phone buzzed again, and he almost didn't answer, but the name flashing made him hesitate. It was Tund. Just yesterday, Kofi had spoken with his friend, Amici, a man who had studied finance and the ways of the city. "Brother," Amici said, voice firm yet kind, "you must learn to set boundaries. Give without limit, and they will take. Your generosity will be swallowed. You will break if you do not protect your own strength." Kofi nodded, but the words of his mother came back to him with equal force. "Blood is sacred, Kofi. To deny family is to deny your ancestors. They see your heart, and curses follow the stubborn. You must give, or shame, and worse, will find you." The night grew heavy with his thoughts. Kofi tossed on his mat, listening to the distant hum of Lagos. Logic told him to refuse. Tradition demanded he yield. He felt guilt sit upon him like a stone pressed to the chest, heavier than reason, denser than any fear of failure. Then he closed his eyes and saw a vision. In the center of the village, a well, sparkling and clear, fed children laughing as they drew water. Women balanced full buckets on their heads without strain, and elders sat beneath the shade, smiling at the gift of labor made lighter. The river no longer swallowed hours of their day, and the village thrived, free from thirst. Each month, Kofi set aside coins, secret from all eyes, imagining the laughter, the blessings, the village renewed. It was his dream, quiet and precious, nurtured in the soil of hope. But then Tund arrived, voice urgent, eyes gleaming with ambition. "Kofi," he said, "there is a venture that will change everything. A chance to earn enough for the village, for our families, for everyone. I need only your support, and it will multiply tenfold." His tone brooked no refusal, and his words carried the weight of promise and the edge of desperation. Kofi counted his savings, felt the weight of the well he had long imagined, and then slowly, with a sigh that shook his shoulders, he gave. The coins moved from his hand to Tund's, and with them, the dream of clean water was buried beneath the urgency of obligation. That night, the well dried before it was born, leaving Kofi to walk home beneath the city lights with a heart heavy, a vision deferred, and the taste of sacrifice lingering like bitter cola on his tongue. Kofi stepped off the dusty bus into the familiar warmth of Ialeo, the red earth pressed beneath his worn sandals. The sky was quiet, soft hues of orange fading into violet, as if the village itself held its breath. He had come without warning, carrying a small hope that Tund's pleas were true, that his cousin's misfortunes had been genuine. Children ran past, carrying bundles of cassava, and elders nodded in greeting, unaware that the city visitor bore both curiosity and caution. He walked toward Tund's house and stopped. The sight made his stomach tighten. Bright, silk-like cloths draped Tund's shoulders. His sandals were polished and new. Trinkets glimmered on his walls, none of them the humble tokens of a man struggling to survive. The truth, once a whisper, now struck Kofi like a drum in the stillness. "All this, from the money I sent," he murmured under his breath. Questions came in the form of whispers, carried by the wind through the narrow streets. Rumors spoke of gambling tables in the nearby town, nights filled with reckless laughter, dice rolling against hope, and coins disappearing like river water through fingers. Kofi's hands clenched, yet he found no words to confront Tund. The villagers, though they saw it too, stayed silent. Blood ties and fear of conflict created walls thicker than any fence. The quiet was louder than accusation, and in that silence, shame burned deeper than anger. He realized he had been seen not as generous, but as naive, his giving mistaken for weakness. The next days brought the ripples of consequence. One relative approached, hopeful and polite. "Kofi," he said, "if Tund can receive help, surely I may ask for a little support for my child's school fees?" Another stepped forward, citing medical bills, then another for a failed trade. Kofi's generosity, once a gift, now marked him as a walking wallet. The village's golden son, the young man praised for character and virtue, was no longer admired for who he was, but for the coins in his hands. Every knock, every plea, every expectant eye reminded him that kindness without limits had a cost, and that the weight of family could bend even the strongest heart. Kofi sat in his small Lagos apartment, staring at the dwindling numbers on his bank app. Each transaction to Tund, each promise fulfilled, was a small stream stealing from his own reservoir. His chest tightened with a quiet fear, the kind that creeps like smoke through the corners of the heart. The savings he had hoped would one day build security were melting like ice under the blazing sun, leaving only emptiness and regret. Back in Ialeo, the consequences rippled closer to home. His sister's tuition fees remained unpaid, her books unopened, while he sent yet another sum to relatives whose eyes glimmered with expectation rather than gratitude. He tried to console himself, whispering, "Blood is blood. I do this for the family," but each word rang hollow against the truth gnawing at him. Late one night, a mocking voice cut through the quiet, Tund's laughter, carried on the wind from a neighboring room. "Soft-hearted Kofi," he sneered. "So easy to milk, always giving, never stopping. Maybe one day he'll learn, but not today." Kofi's hands clenched as the words struck like sharp knives. His spirit, long patient and generous, now bristled with humiliation. Then came the storm. Thunder rumbled like ancestral drums, and rain poured in heavy sheets, washing over the village as if the sky itself were angry. Kofi ran toward the baobab, sacred and wide, once a symbol of protection and unity. A heavy branch cracked and fell to the earth, splintering in the mud. The elders gathered beneath its canopy, faces grave. "The ancestors are speaking," one intoned. "When harmony breaks, even the trees weep. Take heed." Kofi stood before the shattered branch, water dripping from his hair, heart heavy as the fallen wood. He felt the weight of his kindness, once a source of pride, now bending him toward ruin. The village whispered around him, the wind carrying their questions and unease. In the silence of the storm, he realized that generosity, when unguarded, could feed not joy, but destruction, and that the ancestors' warnings were as real as the earth beneath his feet. The festival drums thundered across the village square, a heartbeat for Ialeo that called every soul to celebration. Colorful dancers spun in the dust, their voices ringing with joy, and elders sat beneath woven canopies, sipping palm wine and nodding to the rhythm of tradition. Amid the laughter and music, Kofi rose slowly, his presence commanding attention not by force, but by the weight of purpose. The crowd stilled. The air, heavy with expectation, seemed to pause with him. All eyes turned as one, men setting down cups mid-sip, women hushed their children, and the children themselves froze, sensing a story larger than any festival tale was about to unfold. The murmurs faded, leaving a hush that pressed on the dusty earth. Kofi's voice, calm but resolute, carried over the crowd like a river cutting through stone. "I have given," he said, "not for praise, not for glory, but because it is the way of our people. I have sent coins for medicine, for trade, for the well that would bring water to every child. And yet, these gifts have been twisted into folly. I speak now, not in anger, but in truth." He unfolded a small stack of papers, yellowed and worn, passed to him by traders who had traveled from nearby towns. Each page revealed debts unpaid, gambles lost, promises broken. "See here," Kofi continued, "the money meant to heal sickness instead bought pleasure. The dreams of our people turned to dust. I trusted family, and in that trust I was betrayed." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others pressed hands over mouths in shame. Eyes darted to Tund, who shifted uncomfortably under the gaze of the entire village, his charm and bravado crumbling in silence. Kofi did not raise his voice, did not shout insults, but the truth, steady and unwavering, hit harder than any thunderbolt. Every sacrifice, every postponed dream, every gift sent in hope of unity, now weighed heavy upon the hearts of all who watched. The traders spoke next, confirming what the papers had hinted: debts unpaid, promises ignored, wealth wasted on reckless gambling. The village felt the sting of betrayal, a mixture of sorrow and righteous anger mingling in the warm air. Kofi's words had peeled back the veil of appearances, revealing the cost of generosity when met with deceit. The festival drums continued to beat, but now their rhythm carried a note of reckoning, a reminder that even in celebration, truth could not be ignored. Tund's eyes glistened with feigned sorrow, tears dripping down his cheeks as he raised his voice to the hushed crowd. "Kofi shames me. He flaunts my failures before everyone. Does he think himself better than his own blood?" His words trembled with practiced anguish, each accusation wrapped like a thorned vine around the ears of the villagers. "I begged in trust, and he humbles me in public. This is pride, not justice." Some villagers shifted uneasily, unsure where the truth lay. But as Tund's cries stretched longer, a few wise eyes narrowed. The rhythm of deceit could not hide the truth. Mothers whispered to children, traders exchanged knowing glances. The stories of hardship and the weight of generosity began to shine through the veil of tears. It was no longer a tale of humiliation, it was a tale of misuse, of greed veiled as need. The oldest elder rose slowly, a figure carved from years of wisdom. His staff, worn smooth by generations, tapped once against the red earth, and the sound silenced even the whispers. "Listen," he said, his voice carrying like the harmattan wind across the village plains, stirring leaves and dust alike. There was a river, wide and full, that quenched every thirst. Its waters were life, flowing freely to all who needed. But the villagers dug too deep at its source, taking more than they returned. And so the river dried. Even the gifts meant to give life can vanish when greed governs the hand that takes. The villagers leaned in, absorbing every word. The parable unfolded slowly, each sentence striking like the drumbeats that had called them together. "Generosity," the elder continued, must flow with balance, like a river that is both given and respected. Even the most abundant blessing dies if it is abused. A heart may wish to give, but the hand must know when to hold and when to release. Silence fell. The weight of the story settled over every head, carved into hearts like the markings of the Iroko tree. Children whispered to each other of rivers and rivers of coins, of gifts lost and lessons learned. Even Tund lowered his gaze, the smoke of his deceit unable to hide from the clear light of truth. The elders' words had not only judged but taught. In their echoes, the village understood that kindness without wisdom invited ruin, and that the spirit of generosity was sacred, meant to nurture rather than destroy. Dark clouds gathered above Ialeo, rolling and twisting as though the sky itself were uneasy. The wind whispered through the palms, carrying the scent of rain and the tension of a village waiting for judgment. Villagers hurried to secure their homes, but their eyes kept returning to the sacred baobab near Kofi's compound, its wide branches casting shadow even in the dim light of the approaching storm. Lightning forked across the heavens, illuminating the baobab in a stark, ghostly glow. A deafening crack split the air as the tree tore down its middle, sending splintered wood crashing to the earth. The sound seemed alive, a scream of the spirit of the village itself. Mothers clutched their children, elders leaned heavily on their staffs, and even the youth paused, sensing the weight of ancestral warning. "The ancestors have spoken," one elder shouted, his voice trembling yet firm. "See the tree, they mark our deeds. When balance is broken, nature speaks. It is no longer whispers, it is command." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, fear and awe mingling in equal measure. The broken baobab was more than wood and leaves, it was judgment, confirmation of the truths laid bare that day. Kofi stepped forward, heart heavy, eyes tracing the jagged crack. The rain began to fall in cold sheets, soaking his clothes but not cooling the fire in his chest. He raised his voice, steady and deliberate. "No more," he said. "I will not give blindly, nor will I allow generosity to become a weapon against my own life. Coins and gifts will flow only with wisdom, only with accountability." He turned toward the watching villagers. "From this day, support will be earned, not demanded. Effort, commitment, labor, these will be the measures of trust. Those willing to work with honesty and courage will see my hand. Those seeking only to take will find it closed." Tund stepped forward, chest puffed with pride, but the fire in his eyes was defiance rather than humility. Kofi offered him one last chance, voice calm but unwavering. "Here is a way to prove yourself. Work for the village, labor for the people, and you will earn what you need. This is your chance to rise, not through demand, but through effort." Tund's laugh rang out, sharp and empty, cutting through the drum of rain on clay roofs. "I do not labor for coins," he said, pride swelling higher than hunger or need. "I take what is mine by right." He turned abruptly, leaving the crowd to murmur, staring at the broken tree and the choice of a man who would no longer be drained by blind generosity. Kofi remained beneath the fractured baobab, rain dripping down his face, heart heavy yet resolved. Around him, villagers whispered of lessons learned, of a generosity that must be tempered by wisdom, and of a leader who had finally understood the true weight of giving. The storm raged above, but beneath the shattered canopy, the path forward had become clear. Kofi's mother stood at the edge of the square, the bright festival cloths of the villagers around her feeling suddenly heavy, suffocating. Her hands twisted nervously at the hem of her wrapper. The faces of the villagers turned to her, waiting for guidance, for the voice that had always been the bridge between family and tradition. Her heart wavered between loyalty to blood and the undeniable truth laid bare by her son. "Tund is my kin," she began, voice shaking, "but what is kinship if it blinds us to harm?" Her eyes flickered toward the shattered baobab and the papers of debt that still lay at Kofi's feet. "I have taught him to honor family, but I see now. I see the wound that endless giving can leave." The crowd hushed, feeling the weight of a mother's realization. Slowly, she stepped closer to Kofi, her hand brushing his arm in solidarity. "My son," she whispered, "your heart is right. No longer must generosity be chained to foolishness. I stand with you." The villagers nodded, some quietly murmuring prayers of thanks, recognizing that tradition could bend to wisdom without breaking the bonds of respect. Tund's face darkened. He strode forward, anger blazing in his eyes, yet the support of the village was not behind him. He spat on the earth, chest heaving. "I will not bow to shame," he shouted. "I am owed." But even his most loyal friends kept their distance. With pride louder than hunger, he turned, storming out of the square, leaving a trail of dust and silence in his wake. Days passed, and with Kofi's hand withdrawn, the world Tund had relied on began to crumble. The jingling of coins no longer greeted his morning, replaced by a chilling quiet. Debt collectors arrived, their heavy footsteps echoing in the narrow paths of the village. Faces that once smiled at his success now avoided him, leaving him to face the shame of public exposure alone. His friends vanished like morning mist, and the laughter that had followed him faded into memory. For the first time, Tund felt hunger, not the gnawing of a skipped meal, but the hollow ache of opportunity wasted, of labor avoided, and trust betrayed. He stood alone in his compound, coins gone, pride intact, and a lesson bitter and unyielding settling into his bones. The village watched quietly, understanding that this was the price of entitlement, and that even the strongest generosity could only endure when met with respect and effort. Kofi, his mother at his side, observed the lesson unfold, the baobab shadow stretching long across the square, a reminder that wisdom tempered kindness, and that balance would always protect those willing to see it. Months passed under the blazing sun, and Tund felt its weight in ways he had never known. The once laughing, carefree man now carried lines of fatigue across his face, and his hands, which had once been idle, now bore the calluses of labor. The soil of the fields welcomed him reluctantly, and yet he bent, scraped, and toiled, learning humility with every droplet of sweat. One morning, with the dust rising around his tired feet, he walked toward Kofi's compound, eyes lowered, pride swallowed beneath the quiet shame of months endured. He approached without fanfare, without the loud requests that had once filled the air. "Kofi," he said softly, voice trembling, I wish to work. Not to beg. Just to learn again what it means to earn." Kofi studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded, his tone steady but firm. "No coins without effort. No favor without labor. In this house, dignity grows through responsibility. Learn this, Tund, and perhaps you may walk upright again." Word of the arrangement spread, and the village stirred to life in a different way. Kofi revived the dream of the well, once delayed by endless distractions and misuse of generosity. Men and women took up shovels and buckets, their hands meeting in rhythm, laughter mixing with the clink of tools. Sweat became their currency, a measure of commitment and pride. At the heart of the village, where the broken baobab had once stood as a warning, a young sapling was planted. Its tender leaves reached toward the sun, a quiet promise of balance restored. Kofi watched as Tund and the villagers worked side by side, understanding at last that true strength came from effort shared, not from coins thrown. The earth beneath their hands seemed to hum with approval, and the village remembered once more the lesson that African tales always whisper, that redemption is earned, community is built, and generosity without wisdom is an empty gift. The village gathered beneath the young leaves of the newly planted sapling, the sun filtering through its tender branches. The oldest elder, bent with age yet firm with authority, raised his hand. "Listen well, children of Ileo," he began, voice steady like the rhythm of distant drums. "Help should lift, not weaken. A hand that gives without thought may crush the very spirit it intends to nurture." The villagers murmured, reflecting on months of imbalance. They remembered the broken baobab, the wasted coins, and the lessons etched in sweat and soil. Slowly, understanding grew. Kindness without wisdom had invited misuse. Generosity without boundaries had strained the bonds of family and community. Tradition, they realized, must bend to protect dignity. Saying no was not betrayal, it was love, a shield against harm. Eyes met, nods were exchanged, and the community embraced this new truth. The young sapling stretched toward the sun, leaves bright and hopeful, a living promise of renewal. Around the newly built well, children's laughter rang clear, their cups filled with fresh water, symbolizing hope reborn. Kofi stood quietly among them, no longer merely the giver of coins, but the bearer of wisdom. He had learned that generosity was not measured by the gold one shares, but by the life one nurtures through thought, care, and discipline. A gentle wind stirred the leaves, carrying a whisper across the village. True generosity builds strength, not dependency. And in that whisper, the story of Ileo found its lasting home.